Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Think Your Way to an Epic Life. And today, my guest, I'm telling you, reading his bio made me think he was going to be like 400 years old because the man has done so much. And it seems to me, from the little bit I've talked to him, that he's just beginning. He's just at the beginning. He has his MBA. He has been 12 years in the military. He's got awards and honors. I mean, we are going to have a blast. He's a coach. He's written a book. We're just going to have a really good time and roll with this. Jevon, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kara. It's an honor to be here, and yes, we are going to have a lot of fun.
Yes, we are. It seems like we're I can't say brothers or sisters, maybe brother and sister of a different mother, because
There you go.
just reading all of the stuff about you is just really amazing. So let's kind of start, not necessarily your childhood, but the beginning of your career and all that stuff, and then how did you get from there to here?
Absolutely. I'll start a little bit before the military because I feel like it's important for the audience to really get to know, how this all became a thing. Me sitting right here in this moment. Um, so I grew up in Rochester, New York, and at the age of 17, right, I was in my senior year of high school. I got into a little bit of trouble, actually a lot of bit of trouble. I was actually sitting in a jail cell facing 7 years in prison. And this was a turning point for me, right? I was facing an assault and robbery charge, hanging with the wrong crowd, being there, wrong place, wrong time, all that good stuff. But it was a moment where I was there. I had to take extreme ownership, as my guy Jocko Willing talks about. And I remember going to the visitation room, seeing my mom and my sister, and I had never seen them so worn. Now, at this point, I wasn't the Jevon you see today, right? I didn't care about life. I was angry about being poor, angry about not having options, felt like no one cared, including myself. But in that moment, I realized that value is not tied to monetary things. It's not tied to material things. I realized that I was invaluable to my family. And when I went back up after that visit, my mom had told me she put up the house for me to get me a lawyer because she didn't want me to have a public defender, but we couldn't afford it. Now, if you think about this, that meant that if anything went wrong and they seized that house, that my sisters, my three sisters, my older brother, and my mother would have been out homeless because of me. So I did what every young kid does, say, hey, can you get me out of this? Please, I need some help. And lo and behold, a couple weeks later, I was actually released on probation. And they told me if I did anything, I would have to serve those 7 years because I was tried as an adult. And that was really a turning point, right? I no longer looked at life as, a waste. I no longer felt like I was hopeless because something in me had woken up in that moment. And I graduated school, tried the college thing, couldn't afford it, came back home, ended up going to the military. And the military really taught me so much about who I am today. And we can get into a little bit about that, like the lessons I've learned, if you'd like to, during our conversation.
Are you kidding? I would absolutely, I'd love to. Seriously, I feel like if military people could quantify their habits and sell them to someone like me, I would pay just about anything to have the habits of a military person. So, what were some of your lessons that you learned in the military?
Absolutely. And that was a well said. I like how you put that. So some of the immediate lessons I learned were the power of collaboration, right? The fact that leadership is not a role, right? It's actually a lifestyle. So when you lead, you have to embody that. And the most important piece and aspect of leadership is empathy, right? The best leaders and the leaders that really make the biggest impact are those empathetic leaders, ones who actively listen, ones who are willing to give you that psychologically safe environment, who are going to say, okay, everyone put their cards on the table. We'll see how we can get this because I don't know everything, right? So I need to lean on you all. And that really changed my whole life because I said, you know what? I'm a leader. We all are actually. And if I just listen and I come at things with a curious space, which is why I became a coach, then I can impact people, I can impact change, and I can impact the world in ways I would have never thought possible. So that was some of the most important things I've learned. And then I learned something else. I learned that confidence doesn't only come from competence, but confidence is also something that we can control within ourselves. But we can't look at things as we know it all once again, right? We have to aspire, not expect. And that was a huge change for me. Right. School came relatively easy for me, but the military did not. Rope climbing and all that other stuff, running 2 miles. I had to learn and condition myself for that. And I feel like the listeners here, that's one of the biggest things, the hardest things for humans to do is learn that, we don't just come in and excel at everything we do. We have to embrace the failure because that paves the road to success.
Oh boy, does it ever. You learn so much more from your failures, right? When everything's going good, it's like, yeah, I've got nothing to learn. Life is beautiful. So what I would say, I'm assuming that your failure of hanging with the wrong crowd and getting busted and all that turned out to probably be one of the biggest gifts of your life.
Yes, absolutely. It was the silver lining, right? Like I said, that was one of the huge pivot points in my life that allowed me to become the person that I am today. If I hadn't gone through that, I don't know where I would have been. I don't know if I would have joined the military, which means that every piece of my life from that point on would have been completely different. And if you think about that, these small moments, which felt huge at the time, but that moment in time, which was maybe a month or so, changed the future Jevon, right? So we have to embrace that. The fact that we don't necessarily control outcomes, we control our efforts and how we perceive things along the way.
Okay, we do not necessarily control our outcomes, but we control what we call the lead measures. The choices that you make right now, the things that you do right now are going to create your outcomes. Wow. Okay. So there's so much to unpack with all of this. I just have to, is your mother still with you?
Yes, she is.
Is she the proudest woman on the planet?
She is very proud of me. My siblings like to say that I'm her favorite. She has not yet confirmed that.
Well, she can't. Mamas just can't do that. But for
You're
her
right.
to have, yeah, I mean, for her to have put her and the entire family at risk, believing in you, knowing something about you that you didn't know, that's pretty powerful. Is she still one of your biggest cheerleaders to this day?
Oh, yes. I mean, my mother is a phenomenal woman. She taught me really the power of humility. She's the most humble person you can imagine. She would give her last, even though she doesn't have much, right? And she's just powerful person, and she doesn't even know how powerful she is. She's very, reserved and quiet, right? Very to herself. But the impact she made on my life as you can see, is tremendous, So every chance I get, I am calling her like, "Hey, mom, I love you. You did a great job. You're doing amazing. Here's some things. I just want to make her proud and represent her well."
Right on, right on. I also grew up in poverty. And so, what are some of the lessons that I mean, how do you change? How do you stop seeing yourself as that poor boy and see yourself as the man you are today?
Yes, and this is a conversation I had to have with my inner child. Of course, therapy and, coaching myself has helped along the way, but even with those things, you have to be open to receive what comes. And one of the most powerful things that I had to do was sit down with my inner child. I literally did what I call the chair exercise, where I put two chairs. I sat in one, and that inner child had space in the other, and I talked to that young boy who was hurting, who was in pain, and I told him, "Hey, this is what you have become. You've made it through all of the adversity. And guess what you gained from those experiences? You gain resilience, right? Which is something that a lot of people who have things handed to them do not have. So you can face adversity in such a different way. And that's another way that you gain confidence that things that seem terrible and seem permanent are actually temporary, right? So you just have to continue to believe and continue to put in that effort, right? And when I had that conversation with that child, It was a weight lifted, right? Because, that person is always inside of us. That young kid that went through whatever we've gone through is always inside of us. But one thing I can do now is I can look back at all of the experiences I've had and not look back in pain, but look back with joy. Because now I can say, hey, we've gone through those things. So anything else in front of us that comes, we know we can make it through.
Right, right on. It is. You know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that you can count on Jevon.
Yes. Yes.
There's
Best
no
bet you
question.
can make is on yourself.
That's it. That's it. Because you're the only one that you can do anything about. You have no control over others. However, as a coach, and I are one, so I can speak to this, isn't it kind of mind-blowing how before you had the title of coach, you had a lot to share, and people really didn't want to hear what you had to say. Now that you have the title of coach and they're paying you, they hardly want to make a move without calling you. What is up with that?
Well, that's a great point. well, one thing is the investment they made, right? So when someone listens to you, you may have a best friend or someone that always asks you for advice and they never take it, right? They're like, oh, you're always great. They never take it because they really have no investment in it. So that monetary exchange is just a representation of them investing in themselves and putting forth effort. So that's one difference. The second thing is, when you have these titles, people feel like you have the experience and it gives a validation for them. You already know you had those before you said, oh, I was a coach. But for them, they see that they're like, oh, this person knows something that I don't know, right? I am not a coach, but they are. So I'm going to listen to what they have. And I feel like that's the difference. But even though you have that title, you still have to prove the value to them because, initially it's just perceived value. So once you prove it and you prove that you're invaluable and your insights and all that stuff actually make a difference, oh boy, it's going to be, you can't get rid of that client, right? So,
Oh
and I
gosh.
feel like that's the difference.
That is so cool. So, do you have, I know I didn't prep you for this at all, but do you have a story, maybe more than one, a story of a client who came to you as one person and today they are just someone's? Go for it. Let's hear it.
Absolutely. I think we all have these stories, right? And this is why we continue to do what we do because we're called to this. So my story actually starts, and this is important that it was really at the beginning of my journey as a coach. So it's been years since this, but I always tell this story because it illustrates the power of coaching. So I had a young man who came to me. He was married and he had 4 children, right? He was in the military as well, but he really struggled with identity. He had lost his parents when he was younger. He was of mixed race, so there was all these things like, who am I? Right? He wasn't good enough for this crowd. He wasn't good enough for this crowd. At least he felt that way, and he had done all these things to try to get kudos and accolades. Joined the military, ran track and all these other things, and excelled at all of that. But when he came home and he felt like he had nothing, he had gotten out of the military, he wasn't doing sports anymore, he just had a job and his family. It really angered him because he felt like he had lost that why. He felt like no one was paying attention to him, like he really didn't matter anymore. So we really had to coach him again, the inner child coaching, but also just giving him confidence, helping him re-identify his values, re-identify what his purpose is, identifying that the anger he's feeling is valid, right? A lot of us feel like our feelings are invalid, but we have to understand why that's happening, and then how he's manifesting it on the other side, because he ended up manifesting on his family. He would yell at his wife, right? And their relationship was on the rocks. So he didn't want to lose that. He didn't want to lose his wife, his family, of course, and he didn't want to lose the job that he had worked hard to get. So we had to really coach him up for anger management, conflict resolution, and all the things that come with you not feeling like you have a purpose, right? There's this depression, the anxiety, everything you can imagine. And he also had PTSD. So one of the exercises that we did that was really impactful for him was the journaling, ABCDE journaling, right? Identifying what the situation was, how he was feeling at that time, how he reacted, how he wants to react, right? So that he can look back at it. And it's very pointed. So he would write it. If he yelled at his wife, he would write down the reason, how he felt inside and how he wants to react. And then we would coach around that. And once he realized that, if he placed an interrupt between that knee-jerk reaction and actually being able to respond intelligently, it changed the game for him. So we really worked on his breathing. We worked on getting him a place where he can visualize happiness and peace, right? Getting that in front of him. And then we also realized, was he a person that needed to process, or could he be a person that responded right away? He found that he was a person that needed time to process. So what we did was we brought his wife in, and we talked to her as well and said, hey, you two, you're a person that wants it right away. You want to resolve that conflict. You need some time to process so you don't say the wrong things. So we set boundaries, which he hadn't had before, to say he gets X amount of time to go ahead and calm down and really think about what he needs to say. And if he does not do it, now you can come and talk to him and say, hey, we've agreed upon this. Right. So we worked on that, worked on effective communication, and he went from, marriage on the rocks, about to lose his kids. He had two from a prior relationship that stayed with the mother. He ended up getting custody of them once he showed that he went through some therapy and coaching. And then he also now has all of them with his happy wife in life. So that's one of the stories that I really love to illustrate, to show that, who you are in a point in time is not who you always will be. But if you have to be willing to be vulnerable, and you have to be willing to do the work, and then you have to, again, be open to the changes that can take place.
That's a tall order for a lot of folks. So I want to go kind of on the same path and not get too far off of it. I have just been having this realization about people. It started with prisoners. When prisoners get out of, they're scared to leave. That's what they know, and they're comfortable there, and they're scared to leave. Then I thought that probably happens a lot to military people as well.
For sure.
How difficult is it to reintegrate into society after how many years? 12 years that you were in the military.
Well, that changed, and that is sadly one of the reasons why the military has a high rate of suicide and a high rate where people actually end up in prison because they don't know how to cope with that. So the biggest thing about that is the structure. That once that's gone, you don't have people telling you what to do and how to do it. Then you have to figure it all on your own. It becomes overwhelming for a lot of people. So the biggest thing that I always tell, like my soldiers when I was in, and people who've been in prison, is support. You're gonna need support. You can't do it on your own, and you have to be willing to talk about what you're feeling. And that's where a lot of us falter. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to be vulnerable, because in both of those environments, or any institutional environment, you think about that, vulnerability, could be seen as a weakness. Right? If you're too vulnerable, they feel like you can't handle it in the military. If you're too vulnerable in prison, it could be, a bad day for you. Right? So you have to really change. It's a paradigm shift in how you react and how you do things, right? The military, that people always say we have very dark humor, we joke about things that are not funny, all that things, because coping mechanisms and strategies are different from the civilian side of the house. And prison is the same way. So you have to have people who are there to help you and guide you, right? And then you kind of have to retrain yourself slowly. I always say, like, when you're going through these shifts, these big life changes, it's really about changing your habits, right? And it's about taking those good ones you may have had, like waking up at a certain time, making your bed, all these things that you do in these structured environments. Those are good. But the bad side, you have to look at that and say, okay, this isn't right. And if you're not sure, talk to that support system, and then ask, like, what? I have a question. Should I be doing this? And it's okay, right? In military, prison, they have a lot of these groups that you can join where you're talking to your colleagues, because those are the people that are most familiar. Another piece of the issue is you don't really want to talk to civilians when you come out of the military prison, because you don't feel like they would understand, right? And you don't want to be like a burden where you're just dumping all their stuff on them either. We have to be willing to say, what, is it okay if I speak to you about X, right? I'm really feeling this way. And that is the way that we can really operate at a higher level and not start to pretty much degrade, right? Because that's what happens to a lot of people when they come out of these institutional environments. So we need to be able to pour out the pain so we can allow in some of that joy.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So, someone who might be watching this that is coming back from the military, they could contact you and be one of your coaching clients. Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Well, we'll of course put all your information in there. When you were in the military, you won a Bronze Star, which is wow. Are you okay talking about that?
Yes, yes, absolutely. That's one of those medals that I think most people, if not all of us, who receive it would love to give it back. Right? We'd love to trade that in for the incident not taking place. So I was awarded my Bronze Star in Afghanistan. Right, well, on one of the places that we thought would be one of the safest spaces when you're there, which is on the base. There was a suicide bombing. He had been bringing in pieces over 5 years of this bomb. Of course, there was supposed to be checks and balances in place, but got a little lax, right? And he decided that on Veterans Day of 2016, during a Veterans Day run, that he would try to take out as many people as he could. Thankfully, there were some young soldiers who forced him to detonate, who made him kind of paranoid, and he detonated early, and he detonated where some barriers could block a lot of the blasts. But what took place then was, of course, there were still people injured, and some people lost their lives, including those two young soldiers who stopped them. I was awarded my Bronze Star for getting people to safety, and getting them triaged at the hospital, which was about a mile down the road, and then also taking place to help them do the patient administration, get them into the operating rooms, provide that initial, emergency medical support. And yeah, we end up saving. Thankfully, he didn't make it into the center of the crowd, but hundreds of lives were saved that day. And I always say, I thank the people who worked at the hospital. I thank the Afghanis who were there who to translate for people who were of that culture, because a lot of them would come on base to receive medical care, and some of them got injured too. So it really was a cohesive effort. I received an award, but there were so many people that actually, were lifesavers on that day.
So on that day, Jevon, did something else take over, or were you fully present?
I would say that initially when it happened, I didn't know what happened. Within probably the first couple of seconds, it feels like forever. But those first couple of seconds, which are critical, it's train as you fight in the military. That's what we all say: train as you fight. Never half-ass your training. Excuse my language, but never half-ass the training, because you're going to need it, right? You never know when you're going to need it. So that's what took over, right? We did all these training techniques for what happened if there's something that took place that we weren't ready for, and that's what happened. And then after that, those first couple of seconds, I was fully present, able to operate calmly. And that's why when I have like business clients and all these other things, they're like, how do you maintain your calm, right, in these types of situations? I'm like, hey, this is not life or death. Yeah, maybe some dollars are going out the window, but this is not life or death, right? So for me, now everything else becomes easy.
I'm sure. Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. Okay, so can you kind of give me the chronological history? You didn't have any education when you went into the military, and where did you get all this education?
Yes. So every deployment, I deployed 3 times. In each deployment, I made it a point to be in school. So my first deployment was in 2012, I think, and I always started the program right before I left, because it made me stay accountable. So I went online to a school called American Public University System. A lot of military people join that because it allows the flexibility we need, and it's covered by our GI Bill. So I started there. I got my bachelor's in information technology through that school, and then I'm a glutton for punishment. So after I think it was my second deployment, I actually went for my master's in cybersecurity, because technology was my field at the time, and I did what they call intensive program. So I got a master's in cyber in about a year, because we just were going back to back to back. And then I decided to get my MBA after I had gotten out the military. So I ended up going to University of Maryland for the business administration degree, because I recognized that a lot of my clients were in business. So I need to understand their thinking in order to serve them properly. So that's what I did now. And now I'm doing my doctorate in business administration, with a focus on digital entrepreneurship. So I just feel like education, you know, it gets a bad rap these days. You know, people are saying you don't need it and all that stuff. But for me, it's not necessarily the academic insights that I receive. It's more about the experiences that I gain. And then it also connects in different synapses and it makes me look at the world from different lenses. So that's why I love to always learn. And it could be a certification, could be a degree, whatever. But I really recommend that the listeners just learn something. Stay curious.
Absolutely. Very, very important. Okay, so what advice would you have for someone who is talking to themselves, not listening to themselves? They're saying you need to go to school, and then the other voice is saying you can't afford it, or you're not able, or you're not smart enough, or our people don't get to go, or whatever. How do you talk them into taking a stand for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would look at is I like to ask five whys, right? That's one of the most powerful exercises because it usually gets to the root reason. So I want to know why they want to go in the first place, right? If it's money, it's not strong enough, right? If it's just for, social standing, not strong enough, depending on who the person is. So you got to find out what that is, that real root reason why that is important for you. And if you feel like you can, that will carry you through those tough times when you don't feel like doing the work, when you don't feel like what it takes, because motivation isn't enough. You need to be driven for it because it's a long journey when you're talking about education or whatever you're going through. And then once they identify that, put that somewhere where you see it all the time, even if it's a reminder on your phone. And then once you have that, ask yourself whose voice that is that's telling you you can't. Because once you identify the voice, you now have power. You take your power back to say, that is not me saying that, right? That's my whoever it was that used to bully me. That's my old teacher, whoever it is, right? So identify that and let yourself know that that's not your voice, right? That's someone else. And then scratch it. Tell them to shut up. you know, Tell them to shut up. And then once have done that, take the action, right? I like Mel Robbins. She wrote a book a while ago called The 5 Second Rule, and it's literally counting backwards from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then physically go move towards that goal. Whether that's signing up for those classes, whether that's getting that certification, whatever it is, physically taking action towards it. And also remember that you don't have to do everything and all at once, right? Make it a point to do one thing that moves you closer to that goal. So maybe today it's researching which school you want to go to. Maybe the next day it's actually signing up for a program. Maybe the next day it's looking and filling out your FAFSA form. So you just want to take it a step at a time if it feels scary for you. Don't look at it from a big picture perspective. Start breaking it down into chunks. And then that your next thing you know, you'll be doing what you need to do, and you'll say, you know what? I thought that this was a lot scarier than it was, but this is nothing. I enjoy it, right?
Right, right. Just baby steps. So you said, I'm almost positive I heard you say that you had PTSD, as if it was something that you have been cured of. Can you go into that a little bit?
Oh no, that was my client when I was saying he also had PTSD. But
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's something PTSD is something that you can cope with and you can have tools in your toolbox, but it can strike at any time. One of the things that really helped me was EMDR, which is like rapid eye movement, and they're asking you a bunch of questions, or they have you focus on something. And what that does is it allows you to put a point in time on that event, because that's really what PTSD is when you had a traumatic event. There's no timestamp. So when something triggers you, it feels like you're there in that place right then, and you don't really see what's actually in front of you. So putting a timestamp allows you to say, okay, this is not real. It's kind of like when you're in a bad dream, you say, this is not real. And you can kind of do things to slow yourself down, because you get really, really anxious. You start feeling the feelings that took place. So you just have to be able to slow it down and close your eyes, take deep breaths, go back to that EMDR, whatever you need. They usually give you like a tool you can use to bring yourself back. But yeah, you just have to find what works for you. I will say that if you are struggling with mental health issues or mental health challenges, be proactive with your mental health. Don't wait for it to get worse. Go right away, get you some therapy with therapists. It may take you a few times to find that right person. There's so many different modalities of therapy. So just keep trying them until you find something that feels like it's making a difference for you, or you're giving you the tools and resources you need. And then also, I like to say, find your 360 degrees of support. So that would look like you need your first level, right? It starts with you first and foremost. You are that 0 meters. You're the first person. People can't support you if you don't tell them how to support you or that you need support at all. So that's first. The second thing is to find at least one person that you feel like you want to start telling them some of the stuff that your experiences are feeling. And it doesn't have to start with the biggest, baddest, darkest secret. You can start just say, hey, do you mind if I start telling you this or something about how I've been feeling? And you'll be surprised how that support helps you. Then you want to go find that second level of support, which is where the coaches and therapists and all that stuff comes in at, where you have them, they're unbiased, right? They have no dog in the fight. They just want to help you in whatever way they can support you. They're professional. They know things that first level probably does not know. And then the third level are what I call the virtual mentors, people you can see who kind of inspire you. You don't act like them, right? Because you can't. They're different, but you're inspired by some things they did. Maybe they told a story once on how they overcame their adversity. Like I mentioned one of mine earlier, Jocko Willing, right? He's gone through firefights and all this other stuff. So he talks about how him and his partners have dealt with it. And that helped me to kind of say, all right, if this guy is going through challenges and stuff, why can't I be vulnerable with mine, right? So just find people like that who you can kind of emulate some of the things they did and give you that power back on your own story.
Okay. You mentioned Mel Robbins' book, and I also think that I have adapted her book to mental things as well. So, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 gets you up out of the bed, but it also, when those intruder thoughts come in that are not from you, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you say your affirmation or your mantra or whatever it is you do. So I think she's a very powerful woman.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is. And talk about authenticity. She's very authentic. That's what I love.
Whew, yeah. I tell you, as a woman, watching some of her shorts where she didn't put on a lick of makeup, she doesn't care. It's like, wow, I can't imagine putting myself out there without trying to look as good as I possibly can. But she is so secure in who she is.
Absolutely,
it's pretty cool.
Yes. Absolutely.
Pretty cool. Okay, so you also have been, and I'm going to actually look down here because it was just overwhelming to me. You have been featured in Entrepreneur Magazine, Inc. Magazine, Fast Company, Founder, Forbes, and Verizon. How did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, serendipity, being open to new experiences and things. I mean, if you put yourself out there, you'd be surprised what comes back to you, right? And when I say put yourself out there, there's no such thing as perfect, right? You come out like the Mel Robbins, right? Be authentic, be vulnerable, and I guarantee you'll be helping someone. You'll be surprised how many people you begin to help by just being you. And that's really what took place. I had signed up for Founder, for instance. I signed up for one of their courses, their programs in 1 year, and I was like, I'm watching this. I know some of this stuff. Why can't I just write for them? Right. So I reached out and I'm big on outreach. Right. If I want to know something or connect with someone, I don't mind reaching out and saying, hey, how are you? How can I connect with you or help you? Right. And I did that. And the writer for Founder or the editor for Founder said, yeah, we can use you. How about you write about these topics? And they told me first one was about being a business coach. I wrote about that. And ever since then, I was able to, draft. And then Forbes, they had Force Coaching Council, right? So I qualified for that, joined that, and they give you the ability to write for them. And that's just been great. And then some of these other ones just featured Verizon. I was their ambassador for their small business digital ready program. And that's how that started, right? I signed up to help and then they end up helping me. So when you put your place in a position of service, it will serve you way more than you served it. And I'm a true believer in that. I do these things not because I was looking for accolades or anything for most of them, but it was more so because I had something to say and I felt like it was something that could help others. And then that just ended up paying for me. So I feel like if anyone is out there who's saying, hey, I've been wanting to do X thing, go do X thing. Right. Realize that the path to it may not be easy, but once you figure it out, It will serve you in so many ways, especially if you want to write. I mean, LinkedIn is the best place. That's where I reached out to most of these people on. I just use LinkedIn, found editors. I would look at like their old articles and stuff like that, say, I want to connect with this person, and I would reach out to them on LinkedIn and connect with them, and shoot them an email, right? Don't never feel like someone is so far out of reach from you, because you'll be surprised who responds.
It is shocking, and I can back you up on that. I literally in my career, anytime I've ever wanted to get information from someone, I've asked them out to lunch, and they're people that I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm even picking up the phone, and they're like, absolutely. And yes, please, and they'll spend hours with you because why? Why did you want to come onto this podcast?
Yeah, for me, one, your message really it resonated with me, right? Shared values. And I say, you know what, she has great energy. I listened to a few episodes, and I said, why not? Right? Let me reach out, see if she can use a guest. And here we are today. So that's how it always happens.
Well, yeah, and you want to share what you know. You've worked very hard to learn it all, and you want to share what you know. And people that are looking at you are thinking, oh, I could never approach him. Well, yes, you can. He wants to share what he knows with you. So reach out, right? It is pretty amazing.
It is. And a lot of us, we again, that mountain versus the molehill, right? So, a lot of us are like, yeah, I could never do that, right? I could never reach out to this person. Well, you'd be surprised what a few keystrokes can do for you, right? And now if you don't know what to say, we have Chat GPT and all these tools that can say it for you. So there's really no excuse, right? Get out of your own way and just go.
I love it. Okay, so I want to kind of close this up on your mental diet. Talk to me about what you take in and what you do not allow in.
Oh, I love this. I love this one. So for me, I call it business media, but social media is one of the key things that I do for my mental diet. I only follow people that are pouring into me. I don't want to watch any trash. I don't want anything that takes my energy. None of that. That's one thing. I do not watch news. I do not.
Yes.
So if I want to know something, I will seek out that thing, because the news is just so depressing. You're always hearing about nothing but negative things. So that's another thing. The third thing is I also take breaks throughout the day. And I know we're all busy and all that other stuff, but I'm very purposeful with my time. There's a lot of things to get done, but I take breaks throughout the day. I actually build them into my calendar. And if you look at my calendar, it is very routine, and that helps me because it keeps me on task. I know exactly what to do. I don't feel lost at any point in the day. So those are a few tools that I like to use and ways I like to use some of the things that we have out there today.
So what is a break for you? What does that entail?
Yeah, so different times of the day. So one, I have a dog who forces me to walk. So
Yay.
I love that little guy, right? So walking him outside, that's always good for me, no matter if it's raining or not. I'm here in Houston, Texas, so typically the weather is all right. And then I have a baby girl, and I have my wife, so we may go do something just fun in the middle of the day, right? Say, hey, let's go to the park. Let's go grab something to eat. So that could be a break. Or I could just grab a book, right, and just chill out. I try to make it a point to take a break that's not dealing with tech, just so my mind can rest, because we're on these things all day. So I usually have my breaks where I'm just resting my mind and, not working these this brain too hard.
I don't think people get that, giving your brain a shower. You give your body a shower every day. You need to give your brain a shower too. And that's just not it. Well, I wish I could take credit. It was a meditation teacher that taught me that. And just to really quiet your brain down and let it do whatever it's doing with all the information you've already taken in is very powerful. Okay. Are there any podcasts, books, anything like that you recommend for our folks before we let you go?
Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't say Design Your Life and Business. That's my podcast. And we cover everything from personal development to professional development. That's one. Of course, you're listening to this one right now, so I am going to shout this to the rooftops. And then books. I would say The Obstacle is the Way is always been one of my favorites by Ryan Holiday. I really, really like that book, showing how adversity could also lead to, blessings. That's something that resonates with me deeply. A book that I'm reading now, I would say I reread From Good to Great. And I reread it because there's always new insights. And I like that one because it talks about companies and leadership, but there's so many life lessons in there that really resonate with me as well.
So I think the odds are very slim, but are you the one that made the comment on the podcast to read "The Obstacle is the Way"?
Probably. I don't even remember. Maybe.
Okay, because I read it because somebody put a comment on it and said that would be a really great one, and I'm like, okay, and it really is. It is a really good one. And then another one along the same lines is "You Are the Placebo." I know. It's like, okay. Yeah, "You Are the Placebo" is another really great book. I'm not finished with it yet, so I can't promise it doesn't go off the deep end on the towards the end, but at the beginning it just goes into, oh my gosh, it's just a wake-up call where in the military, a doctor, this is one of the stories, a doctor ran out of morphine. He has a soldier coming in. Now, this was back in the day before you would actually put somebody under to do surgery, and all they had was morphine, and he was out of morphine, and this soldier had to have surgery, and he thought, if I give him surgery without morphine, he'll have a heart attack. And he was trying to figure it out. A nurse went over, filled up a syringe full of saline, walks over to the soldier and says, "Here's your morphine," and they did the surgery, no problem. Our minds are powerful beyond belief. They really are.
I mean, if that's not an example of how powerful, I don't know what is. That wow.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, wow. So I have so enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to it. You're going to make a trip out here, and we're going to do one of these live in person. I can just feel it coming.
Absolutely. I need that beautiful backdrop or in front of us though, when we do that. So we're gonna have to find a nice podcast studio where we just get some of that New Mexico beauty.
Okay, you got it, my friend. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much for having me, Kara. It's been a pleasure.